And so, welcome to the new game that I'm going to be playing, which is actually Trinity Universe, as you can tell by the title. Trinity Universe is a very, very interesting JRPG in my opinion, as it comes in through that whole entire combo-based series. It actually has two different main characters who have two intertwining stories. So we're going to go ahead and start with Kanata, whatever. I'm just going to be calling him Kanata for the rest of the story. 'So, with our very first introductory scene over with, we are about to be introduced to the two mainish characters of this storyline. There's actually way more main characters than that, but these are the ones you're going to see talking for the majority of, and the story tends to revolve around these two as well as one more person. Now we're introduced to Kanata, and whenever she gets introduced, Tsubaki. Kanata and Tsubaki are very interesting characters, and they'll both be developed as we go through the story. But let's talk a little bit more about the game because there's not too much about to happen right here. All we know is some ceremony happened. Apparently, Kanata was something, but now he's something else, and he's supposed to be doing something. However, things are going wrong. We just don't know what's really going on at this point in time. We will later, and as we play the other story, it explains how things have fallen into the way that they have. But all we know is we're introduced to this one person who's kind of a free spirit, generic JRPG main character. Tsubaki's a little bit more interesting in my opinion because she's quite. She's almost. I can't even think of the word right now, but she can be angry 1 second, happy 1 second, angry the next. But talking a little bit about the game, Trinity Universe is very similar to Hyperdimensional Neptune. Hyperdimension Neptune. I don't know why I keep wanting to add the O onto the end of that. In that it is a very dungeon-based JRPG, but at the same time, it's a lot more polished, and it's almost to the point of where I'd say that this game, even though it came out just under a year before Hyperdimensional Neptune came out, it seems more like Hyperdimension Neptune's successor. It's a lot better of a game, and for the most part, except for one thing. One thing is incredibly terrible about this game. You're going to see it when we get to the end of this. You're going to see it more as we go through, but for right now, you're not going to run into that much with these videos. Also, I've decided to make another change. I'm actually going to go ahead and upload 2 different versions of this. One's going to be commentary lists, and one's with commentary. Main difference is, whenever I watch walkthroughs, I prefer to watch them without commentary. When I watch speedruns, I prefer to watch them with commentary. So that's just how I'm going to run it this time around. But apparently Kanata is important enough to have a vassal or a servant in the name of Tsubaki. But how exactly he's important isn't fully explained yet. It has something to do with his father Lord Shooten, but you're not going to run into Lord Shooten for a while. As a matter of fact, I think, yes, you do fight Lord Shooten in... Do you? I don't even remember. Let's just come to that bridge when we get to it. But the story to this game is very event-driven as well. In the Hyperdimensional Neptune playthrough, you didn't see me run through all the story events as much, mainly because I knew which events to avoid and which ones not to. It's been like 2 years since the last time I played through this game, so yeah. We're going to run into a few events that aren't necessarily required for the story, but it's going to be okay. I'm going to skip the majority of them anyway. Also, this is going to be a very long video, but a lot of the other videos are going to get a lot shorter. This video is just so long because I wanted to get the first dungeon in, and all of the tutorials that they make you go through waste at least 18 minutes. Even if it's a new game plus, which this is a new game plus. Now, apparently these characters were stronger than they are now, and that's a fact that's touched on a little bit more. You see a lot more of it in Roselia's storyline than you do in Kanata's, because there's no beginning fight because he's the beginner character. And the reason why we're running through Kanata's story first is because Roselia's story has a lot more backstory to it and explains a lot more of the game, which is kind of backwards, but I think that's the way a story should be told. You shouldn't have everything explained to you until the very end of it. Now, this is one of the tutorials. I just went ahead and flew through this. This is the world as you see it, and this is technically your main hub. I'm going to go ahead and equip. As opposed to Hyperdimensional Neptune, which you've already seen, The main characters, your characters don't keep their levels when you transfer over from a New Game Plus. That's okay though, because all the stats and skills come from your items anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Like right at this point in time, I have the power of a level 70, which is absolutely insane. But for this video, you're going to see me go through all of the events. They're not really important. This is one of the very few story events. But the majority of the time, I'm going to skip the majority of events that I can, if that's possible. And mainly because they don't add a lot to the story. The only thing that really happens in this particular event is the fact that we run into another character. And the character we're going to run into is actually Roselia. I don't think they actually give you her name at this point in time, but you're going to hear it at the end of this video anyway. You also get a little bit of insight into how this world works. It's the fact that everything, it always seems like it's dusk, but it can be noon, morning, night, and midday. Which, by the way, is quite important to the story. Well, not to the story, but to how you play. Different characters are stronger at different times during the day. And one of the characters that you're going to see me use happens to get a big boost at night. So you'll see me go to the inn and rest until night just to get that boost. Well, you probably won't see me do that, because the only time we really need to do that is when you're doing background dungeons, which I'm going to have to do in this. The reason why I'm going to have to do this is because the true ending requires, well, we'll get to that when we get to that. The events are actually a little comical and quite funny. But if you want to think about it, it's a lot like Disguise cutscenes where, yeah, they impart a little bit of the story, but the main point of it is to entertain. They don't really impart that much about the story. And a lot of these will do the same thing. And by the way, we have tons of money, so it's not really a big deal. Even though you don't actually buy this. There's no way to buy this. It would be awesome if you could buy it and instantly shortcut to, no, it would be quite boring. I mean, the game is already a little boring once you have max weapons at least, but since you don't carry over your level, it's a little challenging if you get to the higher level entrances of the dungeons. And there's multiple entrances to each individual dungeon, and I'll show that in the second video. I do have a little bit of something that I want to talk about in the once I actually hit the dungeon, because there's a long period of time where there's not really, where they're giving me tutorials and I can actually talk about something that I want to talk about. Now, note, one very interesting thing is, in the event before this, we learned where the town center is. Not that it's important to us, because we never actually go there. Events auto take us to wherever we need to be. So just remember that for what's about to happen. If you're paying attention towards the beginning, you actually recognize this person as the other main character, Roselia. She's important, and you're going to see her quite a few times, even though they won't be in the best light. And it's quite interesting looking at the comparison to the two, because Kanata looks all dark and then Roselia looks all bright and shimmery and shiny. It's really interesting how they try to differentiate the two. Even though the weird thing about Kanata is they give him the title Demon Dog King, which you never see any evidence of that. So it's just, there was no point actually calling him that. It's not like this is this Gia and this guy and we're talking about the characters who are actual bad guys.
それもそうか。このマグマのドロッとした感じが。
Also, interestingly enough, Hyperdimensional Neptune has the same event style where they have characters talking back and forth, but there's way more emotions and facial expressions and everything like that to this game than there is to Hyperdimensional Neptune, which is really weird considering the fact that this came out before Hyperdimensional Neptune, but seems to have a whole lot more work and is way more polished, especially when we hit the dungeons. You would think that this game came out after Hyperdimensional Neptune, but nope, it came out a year before. Now, we just found out that we pointed Roselia in the wrong direction. Yeah, that's going to cause some misunderstandings that we're going to have to deal with for the rest of the game. So anyway, 2 more events to go, and then we get to finally go into the dungeons. Don't worry, every video after this, you won't be seeing this many events. You're just going to see the story ones if I can help it. No, we have plenty of money if we want to find out any information that we want to, but of course the game doesn't actually check to see what you actually have for this. It just assumes that you don't have any money because it's the beginning of the game. Shops work interestingly in this game as well. Depending on the time of day and the actual day that it is, you'll get different things from different shops. Certain shops aren't unlocked until certain things happen. You have to get certain items. There's a ton of shops in this game. It's absolutely insane. The downside to that is there's a ton of items in this game. I mean, literally, there's a ton of items. In my first recording of this, which my PVR didn't want to cooperate with me with and just spit it out after 9 minutes, I actually showed how long the item list is. It's critical. It's insane. The number of items in this game are absolutely crazy. And they all pretty much have a purpose. So, yeah. Your weapons, no matter what you do, your basic weapons, you can only buy the basic weapons from shops. If you want to get higher tier weapons, you have to make them through synthesis. So, this is how the game introduces dungeons, and it actually goes straight at it by saying dungeons are objects that are in orbit of this gigantic planet where everything floats around and may actually collide with the planet, and there's a way to stop them from hitting the planet. So that's the reason why we're going. And you don't see the first gravity unit here. You're gonna see it. He actually mentions it right here, so I'm not giving you spoilers. You don't see the first gravity unit in this dungeon because the dungeon destroys it in the cutscene, but you'll see it in future dungeons. Don't worry. There's also a lot more CG art to this game than there is to Hyperdimensional Neptune. Now, not bagging on Hyperdimensional Neptune. I like Hyperdimensional Neptune, but this game is just done way better. So we're about to head into our first dungeon, which means we're about to have our first set of tutorials on how to fight. Even though this is a new game plus, and it should be able to know that we know how to fight. We have the strongest weapons in the game for Tsubaki and Kanata, for goodness sakes. So yep, it comes straight at it with the fact that this is a dungeon. There's actually a... You can actually compare Kanata and Neptune, because they're really close to each other, actually. Now, this is a crossover game, and crossover games are very interesting. Crossover games normally have pre-established characters in them, which also means that you don't get nearly as much character development as you would in a game with original characters. Because you don't develop on the characters that are highlights from other games, and you don't develop on the original characters because who cares about them? We have characters from other games that are highlights. But anyway, we're about to head into our first battle, and the battle system. The battle system is cool, and it has a lot of great things going for it. But there's a huge problem with the battle system. It is complicated as mess. And it doesn't seem like it's that complicated, but the combos and the fact that not everyone has the same combos, and the skills are just, it's just a great big old headache. It's very time based, and that's the only downside to this game. If you took the battle system from Hyperdimensional Neptune, brought it here, gave it the same amount of polish that they gave to Trinity Universe's battle system and animations and everything like that, this game would literally be perfect for the type of JRPG that it is. Now, this was also one of my very first 3D JRPG battle systems, which I didn't like it at first. It took me a while to actually warm up to this game, but eventually I did. I like it. I like it. It's not my favorite, but I like it. So now we're learning skills, and skills are on the bottom right hand side. You actually customize your skills, which is really cool. I like the fact you can customize your skills. But they do eat up your AP, because I have tons of AP here, and they just rip through it like they're nothing. Now, there's actually multiple different kinds of skills or special attacks. These are the ones you're going to see most of the time. The main reason why you're going to see them most of the time is the fact that, well, most enemies don't survive. The enemies that can, you get to see some really cool mega skills and crossover skills and all sorts of insane, crazy stuff. But you have to get up to that point first, and it's rather difficult. Now, still remember, I'm still only level 1. When you first go through this game, it takes like 3 attack cycles to kill all of your enemies. Now, the search skill is how you find treasures and stuff in dungeons, and it's very similar. I showed it off in Hyperdimensional Neptune. Hyperdimensional Neptune has a really similar one to it, but there's more things you can find inside of a dungeon now. You have your hunting area, you have your mana graphics, which are images that you put on your weapons that customize them, which we're not going to go too deep into right now. We're going to go into that later. And then you also have your super secret treasure chests and things like that. Items in this game, they fall to the ground and appear at random, which is really cool. You can also get them from enemies. There's chests. It's actually really cool. You're actually about to see me use the search skill, and that's only because I know where this treasure chest is by heart. There's another treasure chest in this area that I don't get until the very end of this dungeon. But yeah, we're going to come to that when we come to that. There's no hunting area in this dungeon, so there's not really a way of getting through this dungeon without running into battles. Because in Hyperdimension Neptune, you can just like set up a hunting area wherever you were, as long as you had a character with the monster call ability. Not so in this game. There are specific areas for doing it, which is probably a little... No, it's not better. It's not better that way. But the upside is, if you complete a hunting area, you get a special chest, which holds a special skill, or a high-level skill. And I'll go more into the battle system as it gets more complicated, but for right now, enemies don't last long enough for me to really explain it. But while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and explain something else I wanted to talk about. I know I said that there were new videos of Hyperdimensional Neptune that I wanted to put out, and I am still planning on putting those out, and I'm still working on those, but I was working on the videos, and I was listening to the commentary, and I hated the commentary for those videos, so I decided to scrap the commentary. Then a whole bunch of stuff happened, and I haven't gotten around to recording the commentary, and the commentary has to be recorded first before I can actually put out those create those videos, because it's based around the commentary, not the other way around. So yeah, that's just how it is. So the commentary's not created yet, but I'm not done with Hyperdimensional Neptune yet, so don't worry about that. Also, inside dungeons, you actually have shops, and the shops are important because you can buy maps, and your map develops as you run around. There's actually a treasure chest in this area, but I missed it, and when I go searching for it later, I'm out of range. But anyway, I'm not done with it yet. I just need to re-record my commentary for it and recreate the video. There are 3 different types of attacks, and you're mainly going to see me use 2. You have your rush attacks, which hit multiple times. You have your power attack that hits once, but really hard. And then you have, they call them magical attacks. They still aren't really magical attacks. They're really pretty much all attacks. And they're attacks that hit a group of enemies, which is pretty much everybody. You'll rarely ever see me use those because even I don't have a character, or I don't use a character in my main party that really capitalizes on those in my Kanata story. In my Roselia story I do, but not in my Kanata story. So you won't see it that much. But they do have their uses, and it's really great for taking out groups of enemies. Even at the power that I have now, it still takes like 3 hits with the group attacks to kill everything, which is ridiculous for the first dungeon. So it's actually faster for me to attack once instead of use 3 group attacks. Now you see me using the search skill here, and the thing about the search skill is when you use it, it draws lines to everywhere. It draws lines to the gravity core, the special treasure, the mana graphic, and the hunting dungeon, the hunting area. And every area except for story dungeons have all of those except for this dungeon where it doesn't have the gravity core and the hunting area, and most other story dungeons don't have the gravity core because it points you to it automatically. That's the purpose of getting into the dungeon, is to make it float away. And that's what the gravity core does. It makes the dungeon float away so it doesn't strike the place that we're in, which is Imperia. Or Imperia. So that's essentially our whole purpose for going into dungeons. You can look for weapons and items and all kinds of crazy stuff, which is the other reason why. This is the reason why us players are actually in here. But the reason for why the characters are in here is just so that they can stop it from hitting the planet. But those little bags and sometimes what looks like little bottles, those at random appear on the stage. They actually fall into the stage if you're ever fortunate enough to see one. I don't think you get to see it happen here, but they do fall, and they're nice little items, and you want to pick them up because some of them are needed to create the highest tier weapons, which are the double S weapons. We can't see the gravitational distortion here. We're going to see it in a future video, but not in this one. But of course, we're at the end of this dungeon. Well, sort of. And of course, since this is a JRPG, or an RPG period, we're going to run into a lot. So even though we haven't actually met Roselia and know her name, they just gave it to her. Gave it to us, which is Roselia, obviously. So, you see this malicious confrontation that we have between Roselia and Kanata? It's gonna happen a lot. We're gonna end up fighting her and whatever her group is a lot throughout the rest of this game. Now she's looking for us and for some strange reason to do something that she's about to explain. And I don't even remember what Lucius was here for. Even when I played through Roselia's story last time, which was the last story that I played was Roselia, I don't remember Lucius' story. Now what the gem does is they stabilize this portion of this netherverse, which basically keeps things from hitting the planet. So there's something wrong with this current gem that's allowing things to come close to and as well almost hit this planet, and we don't know what it is yet. But Roselia is trying to fix it, and the way her tone changed means that she cares a lot about it, but she's not telling us exactly why. That is important to the story, but you're probably not going to notice that at this stage of the game, especially if you started off with Kanata. If you can start off with Roselia, start off with Roselia. Her story and playstyle is a little bit harder, but you get access to meteorites, and meteorites are absolutely broken in this game from the beginning. I'm not going to get access to it until like chapter 11, which is sad. Also, we make fun of his hair pretty much every time we see him as well. Not Roselia's as much. They do poke fun at it, but they don't do it every single time. It's pretty much this time and one more time. Also, remember the theme music that you heard at the very beginning with the opening video? You're going to hear that a lot, because that happens to be the main hub music, and they never ever change it. It got to the point where I had to mute this. It's different from the fact that Hyperdimensional Neptune has bad music. This music is quite calming. It's actually pretty good for the game, but that theme, you get so sick and tired of hearing it after a while. Like Japanese music, I can't stand that theme. So finally we're into our first boss fight. And our first boss fight is actually a party that mirrors our own, which is crazy. I had never seen that before we got to this point in time. I mean, except for like Pokemon, so that doesn't really count. Of course, now it's a trivial battle because it's like 2 hits and they're both down. Before, it's actually like a back and forth, like you are fighting your own party. It's crazy.
心力が減っていなければ簡単に勝てるのに。
Now, the fact that her powers are wacky is actually quite important. It has to do with Roselia's opening as well as has a big impact on why the story is the way it is and how the story develops. What that exactly is, I'm not going to say, but things have happened, let's put it that way.
これでこの漂流物はどこか別の場所へ流れていく。うん、そうしよう、そうしよう。待って、待って。あなたが宇宙魔界を安定させなかったら、城下町に住む人はどうなるの？漂流物が落ちてこないように大魔玉が必要なんでしょ？
俺は別の方法を探す。先祖代々大魔玉になるのが使命というが、そんなものは。それに俺は城下町や宇宙魔界のことをちゃんと知らなければならない。何を守るかも分からず、使命だからという理由だけで大魔玉になったりもしない。
カナダ様、そのようなことを考えて。
何より俺は冒険がしたいんだ。
それが一番の理由ですか。まあ、カナダ様らしくていいですけど。
お前は何のためにこの宇宙魔界を安定させたいんだ？
え、何のためって。私は
There's not a lot to say during this part. That's the reason why I'm being so quiet. But
ならば、お前の夢
this
は何だ？
idea of dreams carries on throughout the rest of the story and practically everything that's Japanese.
目的も夢も持たない者に平和など作れはつなく。噛んでしまった。
せっかくかっこいいセリフでしたのに、最後の最後で台無しです。
Would have been the line to end all lines.
女神、俺様たちも脱出し。
分かってるわよ。
Now, this is one other thing that's huge about this game. It's not like you destroy it and then you're instantly teleported out like most dungeons in most games. No, once this place starts to fall apart, you actually literally have to escape. And I would have loved it if they could have gotten within the snow and just gotten the Ridley or Escape theme for Metroid for this, because it would have been absolutely awesome. I actually have it running in my head every single time I play through this. Or have a dungeon drift, and there's a lot of drifting dungeons. As a matter of fact, if you have everything that you need from that dungeon, you should go ahead and drift every dungeon that you can. As a matter of fact, you can't even get the final ending without drifting enough dungeons. Now, there is a problem if you don't make it out in the time limit. It's not that bad if it's a... As you can see, I was out of range, so I can finally find that one place I was looking for. But if you are... If you don't make it out of the dungeon in time, you drift away with the dungeon, which is supposedly a bad thing. You get less points for it. However, if you don't make it out of a story dungeon when it starts drifting, that's actually the only way to get a game over well besides dying. And some battles you can lose and still be fine. So yeah, that's pretty much the only way that you can actually get a game over in this game.
女神とは思えない言動でしたからね。なんであそこにいたんでしょう。
But anyway, that's the actual last thing that we have control over until the end of this video. The rest of it's just
そんなこ
events.
とを思うのは
Yeah.
カナダ様だけです。
早くまた漂流物へ冒険しに行きたいな。
どうかなされましたか？
これだ、ひらめいたぞ。
何がひらめいたのですか？
片っ端から漂流物を探検し、重力場を破壊してどこかへ流してしまえばいいんだ。漂流物が落ちる前に処理してしまえば万事解決ではないか。そうすれば大魔玉などなくても問題ないだろう。
ええ、確かにそれなら大魔玉にならなくても問題なさそうです。
城下町を守れ、その上冒険も楽しめる。まさに一石二鳥のひらめ
Killing
きだ。
two birds with one stone, but they
そ
actually
んな
makes
に
sense.
うまくいくかどうか。
大丈夫だ椿、やればなんとかなる。そうと決まったら明日に備えて休むぞ。
So yes, that's actually pretty much it for this chapter. But before we can actually save, we have a whole pretty much 10 minutes of events to go
どち
through.
らにせよ私の野望には影響ね。
Now apparently Tsubaki has something in the back of her mind planned, and we don't know what that is yet. We'll find out maybe later, but right now we have no clue.
変わった味だったけど。
So, for any JRPG fans out there, especially fans of the Disgaea series, you have to know who this is. This is Etna from Disgaea 1, who's also shown up in Disgaea 2 and 3, and I think 4. She's had a ton of spin-off games, especially the printing,
やっぱり
and she's pretty much shown up in every single JRPG crossover game that there's ever been.
あれってなんすか？
ちょっと考えてみなさいよ。
So that was she's one of the highlights of this game. She's the fact that she's in this game makes this game better, quote unquote. And Etna is actually a decent character in battle. But normal Etna is normal Etna. If you know her, you know her. If you don't know her, she just seems really selfish.
財宝を探し出す壮大な。
左うちわで将来を発ね。
And of course, everyone knows the printing.
違う。
By the way, I'm most likely not going to play through the Disgaea series. They're just too long.
食後の気だるい時間
I would play through the Final Fantasy series before I play through the Disgaea series. As Let's Play on my YouTube channel. I mean, I do it all the time for myself. I just would not do it for my channel. It's just crazy. Maybe. Watch me end up doing a playthrough of all the Disgaea games. And well, you actually haven't heard this, but I mentioned the fact that a lot of NIS characters actually have complexes about their busts. Etna's one of the first. Which is funny, because the very first main female character, which was, oh, what was her name in Lapu Cell Tactics that I can't remember, was actually quite curvy. So it's just weird.
第2章銀河美少女海賊キャプテンエトナ登場。
Any fans of Laharl, I'm sorry, you will not be seeing him in this video. Or in this game, period. He does not show up.
カナタ様は元気ですね。
Fans of Flown, however...
体調が良さそうで安心しました。
Anyway, that's enough about that.
思った以上に魔力の回復は早い。でも万全じゃない以上油断はできない。いくら言ってもカナタ様がおとなしくじっとしているとは思えないし、適度に運動させた方がいいね。
今日はどこへ行くか。育休岬に行くのもいいが、魔獣神社にも行って。
カナタ様、何を見ているんですか？
城下町の一行観光パンフレットだ。 これさえあれば城下町を
Yes,
攻
this
撃
is
しても
a whole lot of just nothing.
そのパンフレットは
In fact, I think I'm
よ
gonna
し
go ahead and
行くぞ
sign out
椿
early.
まずは肉球岬で
But nothing really
サン
happens.
キノコを食べ
We
るぞ
spot a printing, you get a new CG, blah blah blah. So sorry, sorry to everyone I just ruined the ending of this video for, but it's not the end of the game at least.
苦くて硬くて
But anyway,
パサパサだし
go ahead and enjoy the rest of this video.
動けなくなる
This is
くらい
Suige Novus
腹いっぱい食べたい
signing
な
out until next time,
カナタ様
and this is Trinity
食べ
Universe.
に行くのはいいですが
Yeah, that.
あまり目立たないでくださいね
分かっている。それとだ、今日は椿へのお礼も兼ねているからな。
お礼ですか？
ああ、こうして外を歩けるのも冒険ができるのも椿のおかげだからな。今日はそのお礼だ。さあ行くぞ。小判キノコを心ゆくまで食べよう。
気持ちはとても嬉しいのですが小判キノコは
どうかしたのか？
いえ小判キノコ私大好物ですから楽しみです。
そうなのか。それはよかった。安心したぞ。
魔王とは思えない行動ですね。
椿、あれはなんだ？
美味しい話がそう簡単に転がってたら誰も苦労しないっす。ま、適当に見繕って持っていくっす。
なんだ？あの出来の悪い着ぐるみはこの商店街のマスコットか？
いえここのマスコットは別にいます。第一あのような粗雑な代物ではありません。
ならあれはなんだ？
さあなんでしょう。
怪しいな。
そうですね。大方どこからか流れてきた新種の生物だと思います。ここでは珍しいことではありません。
いや、何かある。これはまたとないチャンスかもしれないぞ。
何がチャンスなんですか？
追いかけるぞ。
あ、ちょっとカナタ様。
怪しい着ぐるみ、そこで止まれ。
だから目立つなって言ってんだろうがバカいね。ったく誰だよあの能天気でバカいの魔王の教育係は。いくつになっても手のかかる。着物はこれだから。でも
椿、見失ってしまった。何をしている？
小判キノコはどうした？お礼するんじゃないんか？まったくバカいな。